Marry me for 6 months, then leave. The billionaire's offer hung in the air like a business contract disguised as a wedding proposal, and every person seated around the polished conference table assumed the struggling maintenance worker would say yes for the money. What none of them understood was that Ethan Walker was not looking at the billionaire. He was looking at the crayon drawing folded inside his wallet, a drawing made by his 11-year-old daughter. And whatever decision he made next had nothing to do with wealth. Charlotte Sterling sat at the far end of the room, calm and composed in a tailored navy suit. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, downtown Chicago shimmered beneath a gray winter sky. She had spent her entire life solving problems with contracts, negotiations, and carefully structured agreements. This marriage proposal was no different. Her family's company was facing pressure from investors who wanted stability in leadership. A temporary marriage would silence rumors and satisfy expectations. Simple, efficient, temporary. Ethan studied the document in front of him. 6 months. A generous financial arrangement. Clear conditions.
No emotional obligations.
No future expectations. Around the table, attorneys waited. Advisors exchanged knowing looks. To them, he was just a man driving an aging pickup truck and struggling to raise a daughter alone. But Ethan's eyes remained steady. He was thinking about school tuition, medical insurance, and a promise he had made years ago beside a hospital bed. "I need one condition," he finally said. Several people looked surprised. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "What condition?" Ethan folded the contract carefully. "My daughter comes first. Every time. No exceptions." The room fell strangely quiet. It was not the answer anyone expected. Charlotte had anticipated questions about money, about benefits, about lifestyle. Instead, the first thing this man negotiated was his child's well-being. Something flickered across her expression before disappearing. Later that afternoon, Ethan drove his old pickup truck through light snowfall toward a modest neighborhood on the edge of the city. The truck rattled slightly whenever he stopped at a red light. Inside the passenger seat sat a grocery bag filled with ingredients for dinner and a science fair poster board he had purchased on sale. He parked beside a small duplex and checked the mailbox before heading inside. Several bills waited there, including a utility bill he had been carefully managing for weeks. He tucked them under his arm without complaint. The front door opened before he reached it. "Dad!" Lily ran into the cold air wearing mismatched socks and a sweater 2 sizes too large. Ethan smiled immediately. The exhaustion of the day softened around the edges. "You forgot your coat again. I was watching for your truck." She wrapped her arms around him. Inside, homework covered the kitchen table. A half-finished school project sat beside a bowl of apples. Ethan unpacked groceries while helping Lily study spelling words and listening to her describe every detail of her day. He never mentioned the billionaire. He never mentioned the contract. Some burdens belong to adults. After dinner, Lily finally fell asleep on the couch while a family movie played quietly in the background. Ethan carried her to bed, tucked the blanket around her shoulders, and paused for a moment in the doorway. On the nightstand sat an old hospital wristband preserved inside a small glass frame. Most people would have walked past it without noticing. Ethan never did. Whatever story connected that wristband to his daughter remained hidden, but the look in his eyes suggested it had changed his life forever. Downstairs, his phone buzzed. A message from Charlotte Sterling appeared on the screen. 3 simple words. "Decision due tomorrow." Ethan stared at the message, then looked toward Lily's room. The answer seemed obvious. Yet something about the billionaire's proposal felt connected to a future he could not quite see. And as snow drifted quietly past the window, he realized that accepting the contract might change far more than 6 months of his life. The decision came the next morning before sunrise. Ethan Walker stood alone in his small kitchen, a mug of coffee cooling beside a stack of bills. Snow covered the street outside, turning the neighborhood quiet and pale beneath the first light of day. The utility bill remained near the top of the pile. Beside it sat Lily's upcoming school trip form and a notice about rising insurance costs. Ethan studied them for a moment before reaching for his phone. His message to Charlotte Sterling was short. "I will do it." Then he slipped the phone into his pocket and began making breakfast. Some choices are made for yourself. Others are made for the people counting on you. By 7:30, Ethan was driving Lily to school in the same aging pickup truck. The heater rattled loudly, struggling against the cold. Lily sat beside him eating toast wrapped in a napkin. "Are you nervous about your science presentation?" Ethan asked. She nodded. "A little." He smiled. "That usually means you care." The crowded school hallway buzzed with students carrying backpacks and winter coats. Ethan walked Lily to the entrance, waited until she joined her friends, then headed toward work. He never noticed the way several teachers greeted him by name, or how the crossing guard smiled when he passed. Quiet acts of kindness often leave footprints the person creating them never sees. The maintenance department occupied the lower level of a large community center on the west side of the city. Ethan spent most of the morning repairing heating systems and fixing plumbing issues. Around noon, an elderly janitor struggled to move several heavy supply boxes across a loading dock. Without hesitation, Ethan crossed the room and helped. The man thanked him repeatedly. Ethan simply nodded and returned to work. Later, when a single mother arrived upset because a broken water heater had flooded part of her apartment, Ethan volunteered to stay late and inspect it personally. No extra pay.
No recognición.
Just another problem that needed solving. By evening, exhaustion settled into his shoulders. Yet before going home, he made one final stop. The children's wing of a local hospital glowed softly against the winter dusk. Ethan carried a small paper bag through the hospital waiting room and stopped outside a pediatric recovery area. A nurse greeted him warmly. "She has been asking about you." Ethan smiled. "How is she doing?" "Much better today." The exchange lasted less than a minute, but it revealed something important. This was not his first visit. Whatever connection Ethan had to this place extended far beyond ordinary charity. When he finally arrived home, he found an unexpected black luxury vehicle parked outside the duplex. Charlotte Sterling stood beside it, elegant even in the freezing wind. She looked completely out of place among the snow-covered sidewalks and modest apartment buildings. Ethan glanced toward the second-floor window where Lily's bedroom light glowed softly. "You came here?" he asked. Charlotte folded her arms. "I wanted to see what I was agreeing to." There was no judgment in her voice, only curiosity. Ethan unlocked the front door and stepped aside. Inside, the scent of tomato soup lingered from dinner. School papers covered the kitchen table. Family photographs filled the walls. Nothing about the home looked impressive. Yet Charlotte found herself studying the details longer than she expected. Then her eyes landed on the framed hospital wristband beside a photograph of a much younger Lily. For the first time since they met, something in Charlotte's expression shifted. Because she realized there was a story hidden inside this small home. A story Ethan had never used to gain sympathy, never mentioned during negotiations, and never explained. And somehow she was beginning to want to know why. Charlotte Sterling had expected a small apartment. She had expected financial struggle. She had even expected a certain amount of resentment toward someone with her wealth. What she had not expected was warmth. The modest duplex felt lived in rather than lacking. Family photographs covered the walls. School certificates hung beside hand-drawn pictures. A half-finished science project occupied one end of the kitchen table. The scent of homemade soup lingered in the air. Nothing matched the image she usually associated with hardship. Lily appeared from the hallway carrying a notebook almost as large as her arm. "Dad, I forgot to ask if you can help with my presentation tomorrow." Ethan glanced at the clock. It was already late. He still had paperwork to review regarding the contract marriage. Yet without hesitation, he pulled out a chair beside her. "Show me what you have." Charlotte remained near the doorway watching. For the next 20 minutes, Ethan listened carefully while Lily explained every detail of her project. He never took over, never corrected her harshly. Instead, he asked questions that helped her find answers herself. When she became frustrated by a mistake, he calmly encouraged her to try again. The interaction felt effortless, but Charlotte recognized the patience it required. She had spent years managing corporations. This was a different kind of leadership entirely. The following afternoon provided another surprise. Charlotte had arranged a meeting with attorneys to finalize details of the 6-month agreement. Ethan arrived exactly on time in his aging pickup truck. Before entering the downtown office building, however, he noticed a frightened little boy standing alone near the entrance. The child appeared lost, clutching a backpack and fighting back tears. Most people hurried past. Ethan stopped immediately. He knelt to the boy's eye level and spoke quietly. Within minutes he had located building security and reunited the child with a frantic grandmother waiting nearby. By the time Ethan entered the conference room, he was 10 minutes late. The attorneys looked annoyed. Charlotte looked thoughtful. "You could have left that to someone else," she said afterward. Ethan shrugged. The kid needed help. To him the answer seemed obvious. Yet Charlotte found herself thinking about it long after the meeting ended. A few days later, another moment changed something between them. Charlotte had agreed to accompany Ethan and Lily to a school event as part of preparing for their public arrangement. The crowded school hallway buzzed with students and parents. Charlotte felt strangely out of place among homemade posters and folding chairs. During the event, a classmate accidentally spilled juice across Lily's project display. The girl looked devastated. Before Charlotte could react, Ethan calmly gathered paper towels and helped clean the mess. More importantly, he reassured the other child, who was now crying from embarrassment. "Accidents happen," he said gently. "Nobody is in trouble." The tension disappeared almost immediately. Watching him, Charlotte realized something important. Ethan protected people without needing credit. He protected his daughter. He protected strangers, even frightened children he had never met. His kindness was not occasional. It was instinctive. Later that evening, they stopped at a small diner on the drive home. Snow drifted outside the windows while families filled the booths around them. Lily excused herself to visit the restroom, leaving Charlotte and Ethan alone for the first time. The silence felt different now. Less formal. Less guarded. Charlotte's eyes drifted toward the old hospital wristband she had noticed earlier, now attached to Ethan's keychain. "That belonged to Lily, didn't it?" she asked quietly. Ethan's expression changed. Just slightly. He looked down at the keychain before answering. "Yes." Charlotte waited. For a moment it seemed he might explain. Instead, he stared through the diner window at the falling snow. Whatever story was connected to that wristband clearly mattered more than she had imagined. And for the first time, Charlotte found herself wanting to understand the man behind it, rather than the contract they had signed. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in a private room overlooking the Chicago skyline. No grand celebration. No overflowing guest list. Just attorneys, a judge, a few company representatives, and 2 people entering a marriage for completely different reasons. The headlines that followed focused on Charlotte Sterling's unexpected husband. Financial reporters called him ordinary. Social media called him lucky. Some investors privately questioned why a billionaire would marry a maintenance worker. Ethan ignored all of it. The only opinion that mattered sat beside him in his pickup truck after school, and asked whether they were still having pizza night on Fridays. "Of course we are," he told Lily. Some promises were not affected by contracts. A month passed. Publicly, the arrangement worked exactly as intended. Investor concerns quieted. Business speculation faded. Yet privately, new tensions emerged. Charlotte remained accustomed to a world where every problem could be solved quickly. Ethan approached life differently. One snowy Saturday afternoon, Charlotte arrived at the duplex and discovered Ethan repairing a neighbor's broken wheelchair ramp. The elderly man who owned the house had recently returned from the hospital and could not afford repairs. Ethan spent his entire day working in freezing temperatures without charging a dollar. Charlotte watched from her car before finally stepping outside. "You could hire someone," she said. Ethan tightened another bolt and shrugged. "He needs it today." Charlotte frowned. "And what about your own needs?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Those can wait." The answer bothered her more than she expected. Not because she disagreed. Because she had never met anyone who actually lived that way. A few days later, another misunderstanding deepened her uncertainty. Charlotte's financial advisor presented a report showing several transfers from the account established through their marriage agreement. The money was leaving almost as quickly as it arrived. "Interesting," the advisor remarked. Perhaps he was more interested in the financial arrangement than he admitted. Charlotte stared at the numbers. For a moment, old assumptions resurfaced. Maybe she had been naive. Maybe Ethan really was taking advantage of the situation. The possibility disappointed her more than it should have. That evening, she drove to the duplex without warning. The mailbox near the sidewalk overflowed with school newsletters and utility statements. Through the window, she saw Ethan helping Lily prepare a presentation while simultaneously mending a torn winter coat. There was no sign of luxury purchases, no expensive upgrades. Nothing had changed. The next morning, Charlotte quietly investigated further. The truth surprised her. Nearly every dollar had gone toward medical bills, educational expenses, community assistance funds, and payments connected to obligations Ethan had carried long before meeting her. Some transfers had even helped families from the community center where he worked. None benefited him directly. Charlotte sat in silence after reading the records. Once again, the facts contradicted the assumptions. Later that week, another clue emerged. Charlotte arrived unexpectedly at the children's hospital where Ethan occasionally stopped after work. Through the glass of a hospital waiting room, she saw him sitting beside a frightened young patient and her exhausted mother. Ethan listened while the child talked. He brought books. He fixed a broken toy. He stayed long after most visitors would have left. A nurse passing by recognized Charlotte and smiled. "He still comes every month." Charlotte looked away from the glass. "Why?" The nurse hesitated. "You really do not know?" Before Charlotte could answer, the nurse's pager sounded. The conversation ended. Yet one thing became clear. The hospital wristband, the visits, the sacrifices, and the way Ethan protected Lily were all connected to a story far larger than anyone had told her. And as she watched him comfort a child who was not his own, Charlotte found herself standing between two versions of the same man. The one the world assumed he was, and the one she was slowly beginning to see. The question was which version was real. The answer was waiting in a place neither of them expected. The answer arrived on a Thursday evening, hidden inside a moment that almost seemed ordinary. Charlotte had stopped by the duplex after a long day of meetings, intending to discuss a public event connected to their arrangement. Instead, she found Lily sitting alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by photographs and old scrapbooks. Snow drifted softly outside the window. The familiar utility bill still rested beneath a stack of school papers. Ethan was running late from work. "He keeps all of these," Lily said, holding up a faded photograph. Charlotte sat down beside her. The picture showed a much younger Ethan standing in a hospital room, exhaustion visible in every line of his face. "That was during my treatment," Lily explained quietly. Charlotte looked at the image more carefully. The hospital wristband hanging on Ethan's keychain suddenly felt much heavier. "What treatment?" Lily hesitated. "Dad never talks about it much." Then slowly the story began to unfold. Years earlier, Lily had been diagnosed with a serious medical condition that required months of treatment and multiple surgeries. The costs had been overwhelming. Insurance covered part of it, but not enough. Ethan had worked 2 jobs, sold nearly everything he owned, refinanced his future, and spent countless nights sleeping upright in a hospital chair beside her bed. Charlotte felt her chest tighten. She remembered every financial report she had reviewed, every payment, every sacrifice. Suddenly they all pointed to the same place. Family. When Ethan finally arrived home later that night, he found Charlotte unusually quiet. She did not mention what Lily had shared. Not immediately. Instead, the 3 of them ate dinner together. For the first time since the marriage began, the evening felt less like an arrangement and more like a family meal. Lily laughed while describing a classroom incident. Ethan listened carefully, helping her with homework between bites of soup. Charlotte found herself watching him instead of her phone, watching the small habits that revealed who he truly was. The next morning brought the real turning point. Charlotte received a call from the children's hospital. One of the nurses recognized her connection to Ethan and wanted permission to share something before an upcoming charity event. Curious, Charlotte agreed to meet. Inside the hospital waiting room, the nurse led her to a small office filled with photographs. Children, families, volunteers. In photo after photo, Ethan appeared quietly in the background, reading stories, delivering care packages, repairing equipment, comforting worried parents. He started volunteering after Lily recovered. the nurse explained. He said someone helped him survive the hardest year of his life. He wanted to do the same for others. Charlotte stared at the wall. This was not a man using hardship as an excuse. This was a man transforming hardship into service. Then came the discovery that changed everything. The nurse opened a file drawer and removed a worn folder. Inside were records showing that Ethan had anonymously funded emergency assistance for several struggling families over the years. Not with wealth, with overtime pay, side jobs, savings intended for himself. Charlotte looked at the numbers in disbelief. The transfers matched the account activity she had once misunderstood. Every dollar had gone toward helping someone else. By the time she left the hospital, her view of Ethan had changed forever. Not because he was extraordinary in the way magazines celebrated people, but because he consistently chose responsibility over comfort and compassion over convenience. That evening, Charlotte waited outside the community center where Ethan worked. When he finally emerged, tired and carrying a box of donated winter coats for local families, she looked at him differently than ever before. Yet before she could say what she was feeling, Ethan received a phone call. The color drained from his face almost immediately. He listened in silence. Then he closed his eyes. Whatever news had arrived clearly mattered. And when he finally lowered the phone, Charlotte knew that a new challenge had just entered their lives. The phone call came from Lily's school. Ethan stood motionless beside the community center parking lot. A box of donated winter coats balanced against his hip as the principal explained the situation. Funding cuts had eliminated several support programs, including the after-school science initiative Lily loved. The disappointment in her voice during the earlier parent meeting had been impossible to miss. For most families, it was an inconvenience. For children like Lily, it meant losing opportunities they could not easily replace. Ethan thanked the principal, ended the call, and quietly loaded the coats into his pickup truck. Charlotte watched him carefully. "Bad news?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "A lot of kids are about to lose something important." What struck Charlotte was not his frustration. It was the fact that he immediately began thinking about the children rather than his own concerns. The following week became one of the busiest periods since the marriage began. Ethan continued working full shifts at the community center, helping Lily with school projects, and maintaining his volunteer commitments at the hospital. Yet somehow he also began organizing meetings after work. Some took place inside a small diner near the school. Others happened in a church parking lot where folding chairs were arranged beneath outdoor lights. Parents, teachers, retired engineers, local business owners, and volunteers started showing up. No one seemed entirely sure how Ethan convinced them. He never gave speeches. He never demanded anything. He simply listened, connected people, and quietly solved problems. Charlotte attended one meeting out of curiosity. By the end of the evening, 3 separate organizations had agreed to contribute equipment, mentoring, and educational resources to replace much of the lost program. She sat in silence afterward. "How did you do that?" she asked while they walked toward the pickup truck. Ethan looked genuinely confused by the question. People wanted to help. But Charlotte knew it was more than that. These people trusted him. Not because of money, because of years spent showing up when they needed him. The results of his hidden competence were becoming impossible to ignore. 2 weeks later, the school auditorium filled with students participating in a new community-funded science event. Lily stood proudly beside her project while parents and teachers moved between displays. The program had survived, not because of corporate sponsorships or wealthy donors, because Ethan had quietly brought together dozens of ordinary people willing to invest in their children. Charlotte watched several teachers thank him. A retired engineer volunteered as a mentor because Ethan had once repaired his furnace during a winter storm. A grocery store owner donated supplies because Ethan had helped his family years earlier. One act of kindness after another had returned unexpectedly, not as repayment, as trust. Yet even while helping everyone else, Ethan continued carrying burdens of his own. One snowy evening, Charlotte stopped by the duplex and found him sorting bills at the kitchen table after Lily had gone to bed. The familiar utility bill stack had not disappeared. His financial challenges remained very real. Charlotte looked at the papers, then at him. "You spend so much energy helping other people." Ethan folded a statement and set it aside. Most people are carrying more than they let others see. The answer lingered with her long after the conversation ended. Weeks passed. The temporary marriage slowly began to feel less temporary. Family dinners became routine. School events became shared experiences. Lily started leaving an extra place setting at the table without thinking about it. Then one evening, while checking the mailbox outside the duplex, Ethan found an envelope from the law firm that had drafted the marriage agreement. The date on the letter immediately caught his attention. Nearly half of the 6-month arrangement had already passed. Charlotte noticed the expression on his face as he read it. For the first time, the approaching end of their agreement no longer felt like a distant detail. It felt like a countdown. And neither of them seemed ready to admit what that might mean. The envelope from the law firm stayed on the kitchen counter for 3 days before Ethan finally opened it. He did not need to read the contents to know what it contained. A reminder. A timeline. A quiet warning that time was moving faster than any of them wanted to admit. Outside, spring was beginning to replace winter. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalk. The mailbox near the duplex no longer carried snow on its roof. Yet inside the house something felt fragile. Lily noticed it first. Family dinners continued. Homework sessions continued. Friday pizza nights continued. But every now and then she caught Ethan staring at the calendar hanging beside the refrigerator. Charlotte noticed it too. Neither of them spoke about it. Then an unexpected discovery changed everything. One Saturday morning, Charlotte stopped by the duplex while Ethan was helping a neighbor repair storm damage. Lily was searching for an old science fair certificate and accidentally knocked over a storage box in the hallway closet. Papers scattered across the floor. Charlotte knelt to help gather them. Most were ordinary documents. School records, medical statements, insurance forms. Then she noticed a worn folder dated nearly 12 years earlier. She hesitated before opening it. What she found inside made her go completely still. The file contained letters from hospitals, social workers, and financial institutions connected to Lily's medical treatment. But one document stood out. It was a formal offer from a respected engineering company in another state. The salary was nearly triple what Ethan had earned at the time. The position included housing assistance, benefits, and long-term advancement opportunities. The date on the offer matched the period when Lily's condition had been at its worst. Charlotte continued reading. Attached was Ethan's response. A polite decline. Her eyes moved to the final sentence. My daughter needs stability more than I need opportunity. For a long moment, Charlotte simply stared at the paper. Suddenly dozens of unanswered questions fell into place. Ethan had not struggled because he lacked ability. He had chosen a different path. The hidden competence everyone sensed but could never fully explain was real. He could have built a different life. A more comfortable one. Instead, he stayed where Lily needed him most. Later that afternoon, Charlotte drove to the community center and sat quietly in the back, while Ethan helped organize a youth mentoring workshop. Teenagers listened attentively as he guided them through practical challenges. Parents greeted him warmly. Volunteers trusted his judgment without question. Watching him now felt different. She was no longer seeing a maintenance worker who happened to be kind. She was seeing a man who had repeatedly sacrificed personal advancement for family, community, and responsibility. The discovery spread further than either of them expected. A retired teacher who had known Ethan for years mentioned the old job offered during a conversation at a local diner. Soon others learned pieces of the story. Reactions ranged from admiration to disbelief. Some people called him selfless. Others quietly questioned whether anyone would truly give up that much. The attention made Ethan uncomfortable. Recognition was never something he sought. That evening, Charlotte finally asked him about it while they sat on the small front porch after Lily had gone inside. Why did you turn it down? She asked softly. Ethan looked toward the street where children were still playing beneath the fading sunlight. Because Lily was scared. Charlotte waited. That is all. A faint smile touched his face. That was enough. For the first time, Charlotte felt something deeper than respect. She felt gratitude. Gratitude that someone like Ethan existed. Yet even as understanding grew between them, a new obstacle was quietly approaching. 2 days later, Lily overheard a conversation at school. A classmate mentioned that Charlotte and Ethan's marriage was only temporary. The words followed her home. And that night, for the first time since the arrangement began to feel like a family, Lily found herself wondering whether the people she loved most were preparing to leave each other behind. The question followed Lily home from school like a storm cloud she could not escape. She barely touched her dinner that night. The familiar Friday pizza sat untouched on her plate while Charlotte and Ethan exchanged concerned glances across the kitchen table. Usually Lily filled the room with stories about classmates, science projects, and future plans. Now she answered questions with a few quiet words before retreating into silence. Ethan recognized the change immediately. Parents noticed the small things first. After Charlotte left for an evening meeting, Ethan found Lily sitting on the front steps beneath the porch light. Spring air moved softly through the neighborhood. The mailbox stood at the curb where it always had. "Something happened," he said gently. Lily stared at the sidewalk. "Is the marriage ending?" The question landed harder than anything Ethan had faced in months. For a moment he could not answer. Not because he wanted to hide the truth, because he suddenly realized how deeply this arrangement had changed his daughter's heart. She was no longer asking about a contract. She was asking about her family. Ethan sat beside her. The agreement was always 6 months. Lily nodded slowly. Her eyes filled with tears she tried unsuccessfully to hide. "Then why does it feel like everyone is leaving again?" The words broke something inside him. Years earlier he had promised to protect her from fear, instability, and loss. Yet somehow he had allowed her to build hope around something that now seemed destined to disappear. The next several days became the hardest of the entire arrangement. Lily withdrew further. At school, teachers noticed her distraction in the crowded hallways. At home she spent more time alone in her room. Even family dinners felt strained. Charlotte felt it too. The distance hurt more than she expected. One afternoon she arrived at the duplex carrying groceries from a nearby store, and found Lily pretending to do homework while quietly crying over a photograph from a recent school event. Charlotte sat beside her without speaking. After several minutes Lily whispered, "Are you leaving when the 6 months end?" Charlotte opened her mouth but no answer came. For the first time the reality of day 180 felt painfully real. The silence itself became an answer. Meanwhile, Ethan continued carrying responsibility the only way he knew how. He helped a struggling neighbor repair storm damage. He volunteered at the hospital. He attended every school meeting. Yet none of those actions solved the one problem that mattered most. The family he had accidentally helped create was beginning to fracture. One evening after a long shift, Ethan stopped at a small diner before heading home. A teacher recognized him and thanked him for saving the science program. Another parent expressed gratitude for his mentoring efforts. Their praise only deepened his sadness. None of those successes mattered if Lily felt abandoned. By the time he returned to the duplex, the lights inside were off except for the lamp in Lily's room. On the kitchen counter sat a folded piece of paper. Ethan recognized her handwriting immediately. The note was simple. "I wish families came with guarantees." He lowered himself into a chair and stared at the words for a long time. Upstairs, Lily cried herself to sleep believing she was about to lose someone she loved. Across the city, Charlotte sat alone in her penthouse apartment surrounded by everything money could buy, and felt more miserable than she had in years. And for the first time since the marriage began, Ethan questioned whether agreeing to the arrangement had been the right decision at all. The countdown toward day 180 continued. The family bond they had built was weakening. Yet neither Ethan nor Charlotte knew that the truth about what Lily meant to both of them was about to be revealed in a way neither could ignore. Day 179 arrived with a steady spring rain tapping against the windows of the duplex. The date stared back from the kitchen calendar like a deadline no one wanted to acknowledge. Ethan rose before sunrise as he always did. He packed Lily's lunch, reviewed a stack of maintenance requests for work, and left a handwritten note beside her breakfast plate. Yet every ordinary routine carried a quiet sadness. The agreement would end tomorrow. The family they had built was supposed to disappear with it. When Ethan checked the mailbox before leaving, he found the final legal documents confirming the conclusion of the arrangement. He folded them carefully and slipped them into his jacket pocket. Inside the house, Lily watched from the window. The sight hurt more than she expected. At school she struggled to focus. In the crowded school hallway, even her teachers noticed. Meanwhile, Charlotte sat through executive meetings without hearing half of what was said. Every report felt meaningless. Every presentation felt distant. For months she had convinced herself that the arrangement served a purpose. Now she could not stop thinking about what came after. That afternoon, Ethan left work early to attend a community appreciation gathering at the church parking lot, where families, teachers, volunteers, and local residents were celebrating the success of the science program he had helped save. He had tried to avoid attention, but attendance had grown larger than expected. Parents brought children. Teachers shared stories. Hospital staff arrived. Even several families he had quietly helped over the years appeared. Charlotte stood near the back watching. She noticed something she had somehow missed before. None of these people admired Ethan because he was married to a billionaire. They admired him because he had shown up for them long before anyone was watching. One by one, people stepped forward. A single mother spoke about the night Ethan repaired her heater during a snowstorm. A nurse described years of hospital visits to frighten children. A retired engineer thanked him for helping keep educational programs alive. The stories continued. Not grand gestures. Consistent acts of service. Quiet dignity repeated over years. Then came the moment that changed everything. Lily stepped forward holding a folded piece of paper. Her hands trembled. The crowd fell silent. People keep talking about what my dad has done for them, she began softly. I want to talk about what he did for me. Ethan immediately looked uncomfortable. Lily continued anyway. She told them about the hospital years, about the opportunities he declined, about the nights he stayed awake beside her bed, about the job offer he turned down because she needed stability more than he needed success. She spoke about every sacrifice she had only recently learned to understand. By the time she finished, many people were wiping away tears. Ethan lowered his eyes. Not from embarrassment, from humility. Then Lily looked directly at Charlotte. I used to think my dad spent his life fixing broken things because it was his job, she said. But that is not true. He does it because he loves people. The silence that followed seemed to stop the entire world. In that moment, emotional justice finally arrived. The value of the man who had spent years putting everyone else first was no longer hidden. It was seen. Fully. Honestly. Deservedly. Later that evening, rain continued falling as people drifted home. Ethan loaded folding chairs into his pickup truck while Charlotte stood nearby struggling with emotions she could no longer ignore. The final documents remained folded in his jacket. Tomorrow he would leave exactly as promised. Because keeping his word mattered. Because integrity mattered. Because he would never ask someone to choose him. When the last chair was stored away, Ethan turned toward the driver's door. I should get Lily home, he said quietly. Charlotte looked at him. Then at Lily waiting beneath the church awning. Then back at the man who had spent 6 months showing her what family truly meant. No hice en pos. Charlotte took a shaky breath. For the first time in her life, she spoke without a contract, strategy, or carefully prepared plan. Do not leave tomorrow. The words surprised even her. Tears filled her eyes. Please stay. Ethan stared at her in silence. The billionaire who once viewed marriage as a transaction was now asking for something money could never buy. Not a husband on paper. Partner. A father. A family. Lily's face brightened through tears as she watched them. The answer came not through dramatic speeches but through the gentle smile Ethan gave his daughter first. Then Charlotte. Months later, the duplex remained filled with school projects, grocery lists, family photographs, and the ordinary chaos of daily life. The old pickup truck still sat outside. Friday pizza nights continued. Hospital visits continued. Community projects continued. The difference was that nobody counted down days anymore. The contract had ended. The family had not. In the end, the greatest thing Ethan Walker built was never a program, a project, or a career. It was a home where people felt chosen. A home built from responsibility, sacrifice, kindness, and quiet strength. And sometimes the strongest love is not the one that arrives with promises. It is the one that stays.